All right, hope you guys doing well. It's been a little while, and in this video, we're going to talk about some of the recent updates to Flowise, particularly their version 2 of their agent flow system, where you'll be able to create these complex and sophisticated multi-agent systems for your applications and for your chat assistants. Now, there's a ton of new features with this version 2. And the best way to show you what you can do with this new system is we're actually going to go back and take a look at an earlier project we worked on where we created a e-commerce product recommendation system that could basically take and get access to a database of products, and then based on the user's query, it can actually recommend different products that the user is looking for. So if you haven't seen that video, go ahead and check it out. But basically, the assistant here is able to provide a variety of products that come from a store that we're looking for. So in this case, we're looking for a professional 4K camera, and then it will actually go to the database, the product database, fetch the relevant products via an SQL query, and then return them along with the descriptions and the images and things like that. And so this was a really, really great project because, it has so many different applications. And so in that original video, we talked about how we created the databases and the tables to be able to do this. So in this particular case, we had our product catalog table, we had an image table for the images, and we also had like a sales piece and inventory piece that we could actually develop later. And then what we did was, so the first thing that we did was we got the product schema, which is basically just a description of the actual table that we're using, right? So in this case, we're looking at the product database. And then what we do is from that, we actually are able to generate an SQL query that's based on the user's query, right? And then using NAN, we execute that query. And then we return the results back to our chatbot or our agent. And then that's what the user sees. All right. So that's exactly what the user would see here, the returned data. All right. And the way this looked was we actually go ahead and take a look at the original chat flow. Right. And so this is essentially our chat flow. Right. So we're getting the database schema. And then we're going ahead and we're actually generating the SQL query. And then we're actually setting the SQL query, assigning it to a variable. And then we are running that query, fetching the product data, and then finally displaying it to the user. All right. And what we did was for this case, we're using both Flowise and NAN to do the SQL queries. Okay. And this is a very effective way, and it works very, very well. Very responsive for the original version of the system, right? But we actually want to improve it, and the new agent flow system is going to allow us to do that. Now, if you haven't really gone ahead and checked it out, there's a lot of different features that really the best way to learn is to experiment with it and see what the individual nodes can do. All right. But what we've done is we've actually been able to take this, we've taken all of this and basically created a version 2 where this actually is all self-contained. So we actually no longer need to use NAN to access the databases. But basically, as you can see here, much like earlier in the original version, we get the database schema, we generate the SQL data, we retrieve the product data from that query, and then our recommendation agent shows us the results. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this this new agent flow out. And so we're going to go ahead here and expand it. And we're going to say, I'm looking for a professional 4K camera. And then we're going to see what happens. All right, and so as you can see, it's returning all of the cameras or some of the cameras in our database. And, you can actually vary this. It doesn't have to be, I think this is like 6 cameras. You can actually have like 2 or 3 if you want. But this is essentially a replica of the original one using the agent flow system. Okay, and then if, for example, you say, I'd like to purchase some headphones, for example. And then it's going to go ahead and it's going to give us some product recommendations for headphones, okay? And so if we go ahead and take a look at what's under the hood, all right? Like I said, the two biggest changes to this, or I would say actually even the three biggest changes to this, is the fact that a lot of the settings that we see in the first version are basically contained within the nodes themselves. So the nodes themselves have a lot more functionality and a lot more settings that you can set up to make this happen, all right? So in this case, we're actually able to connect to our Postgres MCP server. And it's kind of funny because someone actually asked me about this before I had a chance to really go through the Agentflow systems. And especially for version 1, of course, there's no way to do MCP servers. But for version 2, MCP servers can give you sort of an easier, more convenient access point to some of the services that you're looking for. In this case, with Postgres, we're actually using this connection string, essentially, to connect with our Postgres server. And then with this specific database schema, we're actually selecting the actual code is here, okay? So in this case, it's actually going ahead, it's taking a look at our database, and then it's pulling out examples that it can then use for the SQL query generation, all right? And so it's interesting because this is a tool, but you can actually also use a custom JavaScript to actually do the same thing, all right? And so it might give you a little bit more control, but you actually have to use JavaScript code if you want to do that. All right, and so the next node is the SQL product retrieval. And we're using the prompt that we used earlier in the original one. And we're also connecting to an MCP server as well. And what we're doing also is, instead of saving everything to variables, right? So, like for example, once we generated that SQL query, we saved it to a variable called SQL query, right? And so the latest update to Flowise version 3 is we're actually able to use flow states that basically save that internal state of our variable or the data that we're using, and it makes it available to other nodes and other agents within the system, all right? And that's a really big deal because it allows us to really effortlessly and easily share information and even update our flow variables for any node in the system. So it's a really, really helpful feature. And so then what we're going to do is we're going to retrieve that product data, all right? And so this is another, basically an SQL call using the generate SQL query. And then we're going to basically show those results to the user, all right? And that's what you see here with our results here. And so this is great. Like once you start working with it, it's a really great way to be able to create these really rich interactions with your agents. And the only thing I would say though is that with the original chat flow system, it does look a little messier. It looks a little more complicated. It's essentially the exact same thing. But what I do appreciate about the previous chat flow system, which is still used and is still available within Flowise, is the fact that you can actually see all of the moving parts up front, right? Whereas with a new system, a lot of these these elements like the prompt templates and the variables, they're actually sort of under the hood. You still can access them, but it just makes it a little bit more streamlined. But this actually kind of forces you to think about the individual parts. But the advantage of the flow system, or the agent flow system, is that it gives you more convenient control over the execution and the interaction, and you can do a lot of things like human in the loop, and you can do iterations, and there's just a lot of different things that you can do that really give you a lot of advantages. Okay. But what I wanted to do for this particular system was I wanted to not just replicate it, I actually wanted to improve it, all right? And one of the problems or the limitations of this current system is that it can only do product recommendations. The only thing you can do is look up products and then show them to you, essentially. And I wanted to add a little more interactivity to it. So what I did was I upgraded it using the Agentflow system to a version 3, all right? And version 3, what we're adding in this particular update is the ability to do web research, right? And also to chat. And the way we're doing this is we're using a condition agent node to understand the intent of the user, what the user is trying to do. And then based on that intent, they're going to go take one of 3 scenarios. So the first is the user is looking for a product like normal, and this is scenario 0. And then the second one, the user is looking for information or more information on products. Because, even though we have a great product database, it doesn't have all of the information about a specific product. And so sometimes you might need to do more research on it. And then the third situation is where the user is just wanting to chat with the agent, okay? And you can actually make this and use this in a number of different ways. So if we go ahead and actually look at what this looks like, we're going to go all the way to the top. And so let's say that we're coming to our website, all right, our e-commerce site. And in this case, we want to start a wedding photography business. So the query is, I'm starting a wedding photography business and I need a good camera, but I'm not sure which one I should get. What should I look for in a professional camera for wedding photographers? And so if you go ahead and actually look at the process flow, you can see that here you can actually see all of the inputs and outputs for that particular query. All right. And so as we can see, the user's not asking for AI, and it says the user has a follow-up question about a product. And so this would be scenario 1. All right. And so the response that we get is, when choosing a professional camera for wedding photography, here are the main features you should look for. And you can see that we generated a Brave search. So you can see that scenario 1 is actually working. And then it gives us all of the, the qualities of a great camera for wedding photographers, particularly using high ISO settings, a reliable autofocus, dual card slots, that kind of thing. And then it actually gives us some choices for mirrorless cameras, such as Canon, Sony, and so forth. All right. Okay, so this is where the magic of having a multi-agent system really comes into play. So the next question I had was, okay, based on these criteria, please recommend a great camera from the store. All right. So essentially, I want the AI agent to take these qualities or some of these criteria and look for something that matches that in our product database. All right. And so what it does is it actually comes back with some of the product recommendations. But what's really, really interesting here is when you click on the actual output responses, behind the scenes, what we want to do is we actually want to look at what the SQL query actually looked like. Because it's one thing to say, okay, well, just give me cameras, like give me professional cameras. But if you take a look and let's see here, let's open up the SQL product retrieval. And this is where the SQL was generated, all right? So these are our examples, all right, that we use to help generate the query. And these are custom examples based on our database. But if we go ahead and we scroll all the way down, all right, this was the generated SQL query. And what I want you to take a look at is these are categories. So these are basically the column names in our table. So we have category, product name, description, brand, so forth. And what this query is requesting or looking for are, keyword-based searches where it's these words, sort of camera and professional, full frame, mirrorless, DSLR, wedding, are actually in the category, the product name, the description, the brand, or inside of the descriptions themselves, we have keyword-based searches such as dual card, weather seal, low light, autofocus. So these are all coming from the original criteria, right? These are not just generic SQL searches, right? And so what we're doing is we're doing custom-based SQL searches based on our previous conversations, which is extremely powerful. There's a lot of things you can do with this. And so, of course, your product database has to be detailed enough, with the product descriptions and things like this to really make this, work. But this is possible now when you're combining, multi-agent systems together and they're working together. All right. And so it gave us some recommendations for cameras that matched our criteria. So we get cameras like the Sony a6400, the Panasonic Lumix, with various prices. And so we notice here that, okay, the first camera is almost $1,300, the Sony a6400. And then it goes down in price until we get to the Panasonic Lumix, all right? And one of the first questions I had after this, and this is a follow-up question, is can the Sony a6100 record video as well? Now, I believe that's this camera here, okay? This is a cheaper camera. And so it does another Brave search. Now, it could also maybe do something in the description, but that information might not be there. So it does a Brave search. It finds the information, and it brings it back to us. And it says, yes, the Sony a6100 can record video. It can offer 4K 30p, so forth and so forth. And then the next question I had was, I looked at this one, and then I looked at the Panasonic Lumix G7. And my next question was, do wedding photographers prefer the A6100 or the Lumix G7? So then it goes ahead and it does another search, and it gives me an answer based on its web research. So it says here, the Sony a6100 is generally preferred over the Panasonic Lumix for wedding photographers. And here's some reasons why, right? Obviously, it would be. And it says the Lumix G7 is still a capable camera. However, for weddings where image quality, autofocus, and reliability are paramount, the Sony a6100 is typically the favorite choice, right? And so then, let's say I forgot what the price was. I ask, another follow-up question, how much is the a6100? And then it gives it to me. It gives me the price of $748. Let's see if that's the same thing. That is, that's interesting. So is that the same camera? Yeah, it's the same camera. Okay, that's the same camera. And so the price was $748. And so my next question was, do you have any cameras over $1,000? Now, in this case, what we want to do is we actually want to search our database for cameras over $1,000, all right? And so here are the results. We have the Sony A7, that's 2100 or 2200. And then we have other cameras that are basically all over, except for the last one, all over $1,000, all right? So now at this point, I'm shopping for a camera, right? I still have a couple of questions. And I can see that the Sony A7, which is, the more expensive option here, right? This is obviously a great camera, but the Sony, let's see here, the Sony A6100, which I think was like $700, that also looks like a promising camera. So my question was, so I need some help deciding between the Sony A7 and the Sony A6100 for my wedding business. Which one should I choose? All right. Now, this is something that you can't answer with the product database. So it goes back and it does a Brave search, and it says, okay, here's some reasons why the Sony A7 is, much better, right? And here are the specs. And then here's some reasons why the Sony A6100 is also very good, right? So it's got great autofocus, and it's got a great sensor, things like this. And then it gives me the answer, what should you choose? And it says if your budget allows and you want top tier image quality, better low light performance, dual card slots, and maximum reliability for wedding work, the Sony A7 is the clear winner. However, if budget is a concern and you want a lightweight, reliable camera, the A6100 is a great choice, all right? And so this is just an example of what you can do with these multi-agent systems. All right, so now let's just try this one more time, and let's do a more of a live example. And what we're going to do is we're going to do something very similar, and we're going to say we're actually going to test just the general chat features. So I'm just going to say, hi there. How are you doing today? All right. Now this requires no lookup, okay? And it's going to look at it and answer the question. Now, of course, you can actually, make the response the way that you want. But this is more of a chat engagement feature. Okay, so this is our question. I'm planning an outdoor pool party, and I need a projector and portable speakers. for the music. What do you recommend? Right now, instead of just one product, we're actually looking for two. And we're going to enter, and it's going to go through, and it's going to search our database. It's going to give us options for projectors and options for portable speakers as well. All right. And let's say that the first thing we want to do is you actually want to find out more information about the Nebula Cosmos Smart Projector. And I'm going to say here, it looks interesting, but let's say here, what are some reviews of the Nebula projector? I'm going to fix this. All right. What are some reviews for the Nebula Cosmos SE projector? All right. Now I should go ahead and do a web research, and it's going to say, all right, so these are the sources, and it did another Brave search, so we know it's working well. And so as you can see, it's actually doing a pretty good job researching those. Okay, so let's go back to our previous example, and let's say I'm looking for an outdoor projector. And let's get some results here. It's going to go through, and all right, so it's going to give us some examples of projectors. And these are different prices, different price points. And we notice we have the ViewSonic LS, and then we have the Nebula Cosmos. All right. And so let's go ahead and ask what are the differences between the two. So what is the difference? I don't think I'm getting that right. Difference between the Nebula Cosmos and the ViewSonic. And I believe it was the LS, the ViewSonic LS. All right, because one is $1,000 and the other one, in this case, is $1,800. All right, so it's giving us a detailed comparison between the two. And so it gives us the specs, and then it says the main difference is summarized. It says the ViewSonic is much brighter versus 5,000 lumens versus 1,800 lumens. The Cosmos has built-in smart features, but the ViewSonic is much more basic. And then both use laser tech. The Cosmos uses hybrid LED for enhanced color and Dolby Vision. Cosmos is nearly double the price due to 4K, Dolby Vision, and smart capabilities. And then it says it's great for cinema quality viewing and portability. So you can see how it's giving us additional information based on, you know, each of the specs of the projectors. And definitely when it comes to like making purchase decisions, you know, sometimes it's not just about looking at the product description, but you know, you need additional information. You know? And so this is a very, very powerful agent flow that's possible with the Flowise system. And there's so many different things that you can use this for planning, you know, for inventory, for research purposes. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually use this. And so there's so much that you can do with this. We haven't really only scratched the surface. All right. And so if you actually want to download this, we're actually going to be making that available. We're going to be making the original version available, as well as these two new versions. All right. So you'll be able to test it out for yourself. All right, so that's it. As you can see, there's a ton of different capabilities and possibilities with the new agent flow system. And there's so many things that you can do with it that, you know, we're going to be going into more details in the future. But if you actually like to get the updated versions of the product recommendation system, it's going to be available. And it's going to include the original as well as the two updated versions. So you'll be able to go ahead and try that yourself. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll talk to you later.